During his 2010 comedy special, David Cross said this about the Bible.
Antiquated they are, because when the Bible was written and then rewritten and then edited and then re-edited and then translated from dead languages and then retranslated and then re-edited and then re-edited and then retranslated and then given to kings for them to take their favorite parts out and then re-edited and then retranslated and then re-edited and then given to the Pope for him to approve and then retranslated, then rewritten, then rewritten, re-edited, retranslated, re-edited again, all based on stories that were told orally 30 to 90 years after they happened to people who didn't know how to write. I guess what I'm saying is the Bible is literally the world's oldest game of telephone.
We believe God inspired the books of the New Testament, but honestly, what does that matter if what we have today is the unintelligible garble of an ancient game of telephone? And that would drastically change what Christians should believe about truth and God and Jesus and forgiveness and the afterlife. After all, you can't ask, is the Bible true, if you don't know what the Bible really says? Now, I think this might be the perfect topic for Truth Snack. There's a lot of confusion, and I think you'll see how adventurous truth-seeking will lead to confident belief. But as we go on our adventure, you need to know that there's a ditch on either side of our path that we need to avoid. Dr. Dan Wallace names these two ditches. He calls one extreme skepticism. We've already heard this approach. It goes something like, there's no way of knowing what the New Testament said because it's been hopelessly corrupted. I mean, the Koine Greek was translated into Latin, German, French, yada, yada, yada. Finally, English. And after you've gone through that many translations, give up on trying to figure out what's accurate and what's not. The reason this approach is extreme is because that's not at all how you got your New Testament. What you're holding in your hand is the result of a single translation. The diversity of translations we have into German and Japanese and English are all like branches of a snowflake that connect back at a central hub, the original Koine Greek that the New Testament was written in. The reason that there are dozens of English translations is because some are trying to translate every single word, and others are trying to capture the big idea of what they're translating. But they all work together to help people like me who don't read the original language really get what's going on in the Greek. Translations of the New Testament are made from manuscripts that were copied much closer to the time of the originals than any other ancient document that historians trust. So if you insist on saying that the New Testament has been corrupted, then you also need to reject every other document that makes ancient history possible. Dr. Wallace says it this way. If we were to apply that same skepticism to other ancient Greco-Roman literature, we would just be plunged back into the Dark Ages. So there doesn't seem to be any good reason to be extremely skeptical of the New Testament's accuracy. It's an ancient document, and you have a translation of it. The other ditch that Dr. Wallace describes is one that Christians are a lot more likely to fall into. It's absolute certainty. Now remember that what we're doing here is adventurous truth-seeking, and it's adventurous because it will probably change you and your beliefs. And even though that change might be a deeper, more mature faith, it can still feel scary. So, even though we have lots of early New Testament manuscripts, they weren't copied by a machine, they were hand copied individually by scribes. And because no scribe copied perfectly, they introduced differences into the manuscripts called variants. Because of that, we aren't absolutely certain of every single word the original authors wrote. And that's pretty frustrating. Why wouldn't God make sure that his word was copied perfectly? I wish that's what God had done, and I don't think I'm alone, because there's a history of these variants challenging the faith of some Christians. In 1723, John Mills wrote a book documenting the differences between just 100 New Testament manuscripts. He ended up listing over 30,000 variants in those manuscripts, and his meticulous work wasn't appreciated by Daniel Whitby, who claimed that Mills had destroyed the confidence that we can have in the text. Richard Bentley defended Mills, saying that all he did was document the variants. And the situation hasn't gotten any better. Today we've documented 1.5 million variants based on thousands of Greek manuscripts. Okay, that's not fun to hear, but we need to stick with this. These variants in the manuscripts exist, and we need to accept that and move on so that we can ask helpful follow-up questions like, do we even know what was originally written in the New Testament? And why do scholars believe that we can still trust our Bibles? And why wouldn't these 1.5 million variants make us extremely skeptical? The academic discipline of trying to recover a document's original wording is called textual criticism. It's done by documenting the differences in the manuscripts in order to discern how and where changes took place. Having a lot of manuscripts, like we do for the New Testament, is a bit of a double-edged sword. The more manuscripts you have, the more variants you have between them. But if you only had one manuscript, then you wouldn't be able to determine any of the changes that were made. So how exactly does textual criticism help us sort out the 1.5 million variants that exist? Well, I think it's important to remember that variant doesn't necessarily mean mistake. The scribes were writing at a time when there were no dictionaries to consult, and so words and names like John could be spelled differently. Neither was right or wrong, they were just different. And that type of variant accounts for nearly 1 million of the variants that exist. Of the 500,000 that are left, variants arise when scribes unintentionally mistake letters. Like how in English, it's hard to distinguish between a capital I and a lowercase l. Or accidentally substitute a word for another that sounds similar when working with another scribe who's reading the text to them, like there, or there. Sometimes lines that start or end similarly can make them accidentally skip a line. Sometimes they accidentally write a line twice. Or accidentally split or combine words. Like if you combine the words sun and flower into sunflower, it would give the sentence a new meaning. And there are also intentional changes that were made, like when scribes try to correct grammar or clear up potential confusion or add theological explanation. There are lots of variant types, but I think what's important for us to remember is that these variants can be compared with all the other documents, and most of them are easily resolved. Scholars estimate that only 0.1 or 0.2% are viable and meaningful. What that means is that only a tiny percentage might go back to the original text and would actually change the meaning of what's written. At this point, the extreme skeptic is going, it's a lot better than I thought. But it's still not good enough for those who want to be absolutely certain.
People, when they learn about this, the first reaction often is, I've been lied to.
Wow.
Right? The wool's been pulled over my eyes and I'm being deceived. All along, there's all these variants in my Bible and nobody's told me about them. And the short answer is no, you do know about them if you pay attention, right? Just read the footnotes. Now, I know most people don't read the footnotes in their Bible, okay? But the most important variants are already in your English Bible footnotes. So just look there and see. And you can tell for yourself, how significant do you think they are or not?
I took Dr. Gurry up on his challenge, and I looked at the footnotes to see some of the most outstanding variants. In John 17:11, it says, Holy Father, protect them by the power of your name. But some manuscripts read, Father, keep them faithful to your name. In Acts 12:25, it says, when Barnabas and Saul had finished their mission, they returned from Jerusalem. But some manuscripts say they returned to Jerusalem. In Romans 6:6, it says, for we know that our old self was crucified with him, so that the body ruled by sin might be done away with. Some manuscripts say, rendered powerless instead. These are some of the variants in the New Testament. When I was a kid, I was taught that we had perfectly preserved the Bible and that we could have absolute certainty. And so the existence of any variant would have shaken my faith. But when I consider the relatively small number of viable and meaningful variants and the fact that the core teachings of Christianity are taught over and over and over again in the New Testament, I end up agreeing with Bart Ehrman, a non-Christian scholar who believes that essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. So it's not reasonable to be extremely skeptical of the New Testament. And even though we don't like it, we also can't be absolutely certain of every single word. But it would be wrong to think we sit somewhere in the middle. Maybe the glass is half full, maybe it's half empty. Maybe we could trust the New Testament, maybe not. No, the glass is 97 to 99% full. The overwhelming amount of evidence is that we can believe confidently that we have what the apostles wrote about Jesus. I mean, just pause for a second and consider that there are virtually no textual variants for these words from John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He wrote that about Jesus. What do you think about that? Textual criticism is notoriously tricky because we're still finding manuscripts and documenting them. So I tried to be accurate and conservative with my numbers, but the scholarship is developing as we speak. So don't stop here. I've linked some resources below so you can continue studying. And remember, adventurous truth seeking leads to confident belief.